Hello students and welcome to chapter number 7. In this chapter we will be introducing how to write persuasive messages. So a big part of business communication is all about convincing others to buy into your ideas, whether it's to purchase your product or service, or it could be that you want to convince them of your skills and personality so that they offer you a job. So a big purpose in business communication is all about persuasion, is all about convincing others of what you are trying to sell them, whether it's a product or a service, or whether it's yourself as a potential employee candidate. So this will be our roadmap for navigating through this chapter. First of all, we will be discussing audience analysis, something that is quite familiar to us at this point. And then we will talk about short messages. And later we will introduce what we refer to as sales letters. So how to compose letters with the sole purpose of convincing others to buy a product or service, and then finally responding to feedback. So the latest stage of communication is all about reacting to the responses of the receivers of your message. So that is a loop that starts and a cycle that starts all over again. So it's always important not to neglect that part. So to begin with, what are some of the obstacles that you might face when you are trying to convince others of something that you're trying to sell, for example? The first kind of common area for resistance, why people would resist, being convinced of your ideas, is them having previous negative experiences. So this also, this is evident in your personal life as well. How many times have you faced that situation where a friend of yours would tell you, let's go and eat at a particular restaurant, for example, and because you have had a previous negative experience in a similar restaurant, or maybe the same restaurant but at a different branch, for example, you would be resistant to being convinced by your friend's idea. So having negative experiences in the past is definitely a major factor that influences whether or not you will be convinced of buying into what the sender of the message is trying to sell you. And then another source for resistance is basically having limited time and money. Why won't you go with me to that trip to Bahrain, for example? I mean, regardless of the current circumstances where everything is already closed out because of the coronavirus, but in regular circumstances, many people would say, I cannot go to Bahrain with you because I have an exam that I need to study for. So I don't have enough time, to study for my exam and also accompany you on this trip. So lots of people have problems when it comes to having free time. And then, of course, money is a major source. I cannot buy this 55-inch LED TV because it costs around 15,000 riyals and I don't have that kind of money right now. And sometimes people are basically, unable to buy certain products or services because basically they have limited financial resources. And finally, indifference, where you basically do not care. I do not care for buying a big screen TV. I don't need a big screen TV. As long as I have my laptop and a good internet connection, then I'm satisfied. So I'm not really interested in buying what you're selling. So when you analyze your audience, you need to have these factors in mind so that you understand exactly how to approach them. Certain areas of resistance can be addressed by offering maybe a special offer, by offering to maybe customize the product or the service, or maybe offering a reduction in price. But if the source of resistance is basically not having money at all, or not having sufficient funds, then no matter what you do, people are basically not going to be convinced. So you need to keep these factors in mind when you analyze your audience, so that you understand exactly how to approach them, and how to readjust your message and your offer, basically, so that you have a better result. So we have seen these questions before. When we analyze the audience, we need to ask ourselves these questions in order to better understand our audience, and therefore, adjust our message accordingly. So who is the audience? Is it a group of customers? Is it a group of managers? Is it, a group of new employees? Is it experienced employees? Is it the general public? What is your relationship with the audience? Are they your bosses? Are you their boss? Are they, relatives? Are they customers? Are they suppliers? Are they potential, customers? So you need to understand exactly what are the common grounds between you and the audience. And then how will the audience likely react? So put yourself in the place of the audience. If you were an audience member, if you were a customer, and someone was trying to sell you a product or service using your approach, how would you react? So that when you imagine, when you try to anticipate certain scenarios, you will be better prepared. What does the audience already know? You don't want to spend a lot of time explaining basics to a bunch of highly experienced employees, for example. So you need to understand what do they already know, so that you use your time in a more effective way. And then finally, what is unique about the audience? Are there certain special factors about them? Are they all from a specific age group, for example? Are they all graduates of the same university? Are they all colleagues for the past 10 years? So you need to understand, what are some of the things that make them different from other groups of audiences. And since this chapter is all about writing persuasive messages, we must explain the three modes of persuasion. And they are represented by three Greek words: ethos, pathos, and logos. What are these things? These are terms that represent the three different modes of persuasion. So basically, what aspect do you focus on in order to convince your audience of your message? One way, one approach that you might use, one principle that you might employ in your approach is ethos. And ethos is basically appealing to people's to credibility, meaning you will try your best to show your audience that you know what you are talking about, that you are a trustworthy person and a credible person who knows what you are talking about, so that they will be convinced that what you are saying is actually true. So that's one way, one approach that one mode that you can use in order to convince your audience of your messages. Another aspect, another approach that you might use is pathos, and that is appealing to people's emotions. So this is when you are trying to connect to your audience on an emotional level, meaning you are trying, to have them sympathize with your cause. You are trying to focus on issues like love and justice and all of those, causes that people strongly relate to. So you will try to use, stories and, analogies in order to appeal to their, emotions. And finally, the third approach, the third principle, the third mode of persuasion is logos. Logos is all about logic. Logos is all about logic. So you are trying to convince others that what you are saying is the right choice based on facts, based on evidence, based on opinions of uh, experts in the field. So you are trying your best to convince your audience to buy what you're selling based on hard facts and evidence. So the three words: ethos, pathos, and logos. These are Greek terms that represent what area do you focus on, what approach do you use in order for you to convince your audience. So these are examples of what we mean by ethos, pathos, and logos. So ethos is all about character, is all about establishing to your audience that you are a reliable, credible, honest, and fair person. But something to be aware of is that different readers and different audience members react and respond differently to different kinds of ethos. So some people would pay a lot of attention to your educational background, for example, if you are explaining to them something academic. Others don't really care about your degree. It's for them, it's all about your past experience. What type of experience do you have in this particular topic that you are presenting? So you need to be aware of your audience, and you need to be, an effective writer and an effective communicator would use different would use a variety of ethos in order to reach out and appeal to a wider spectrum of audiences. The second one, pathos, is all about emotions. It's all about connecting to people's emotions by appealing to such things like love, fear, anger, jealousy. You're trying to use stories in order for to make people relate to what you are trying to explain to them, what you're trying to sell them. And something to be aware of here, a word of caution, is that you need to understand that when your message is too emotional, this is not going to end up well for you. It's actually going to maybe impair the effectiveness of your message. So yes, it could be a good idea to appeal to people's emotions, but at the same time you don't want to be overly emotional. Otherwise you are going to sound like an unreasonable person, a person who is who cannot control their own emotions and reactions. The third one is logos, and this is all about reason. It's all about logic. In here you are presenting your audience with statistics, with cause and effect, with evidence, with proof, to show them that this what I'm saying is actually the truth, and what I'm saying is what you should be doing. Again, not everyone is convinced by statistics. Not everyone is convinced by evidence. Some people would make the decision to buy a certain product or to hire your services based on emotions or based on your credibility. So not necessarily, they won't necessarily go with you just because you are presenting them with hard data. So in order to be a more effective communicator, you need to do a thorough audience analysis to understand what appeals to them the most, and therefore use a variety of those modes in order for you to be a more effective sender and a persuasive writer. And now with the second part of our chapter, and that is writing a short persuasive message. Oftentimes in the in the environment of business and in professional organizations, your messages need to be kept very brief and short. It could be as brief and short as a tweet. It could be as brief and short as a WhatsApp message. So in such a case, you need to be very careful with your choice of words, with the principle that you use in order to persuade your readers. of what you're trying to sell them, of what you're trying to convince them of. Otherwise, you are going to fall into the trap of having a very long and an extensive message, and people will simply ignore it. So, what to do? How to write a short, persuasive message? One of the, major rules of thumb that you need to follow is basically determine how you are going to start the message. You need to decide. I mean, this is a careful decision that you need to make. You shouldn't just simply, do things arbitrarily. This is something that needs, careful thought. So how are you going to begin your message? Are you going to use a direct approach or an indirect approach? What sort of mode of persuasion are you going to employ in this case, and so on. So beginning and starting, introducing your topic is a very important decision that you need to make, even if it is a very short and brief message, such as a WhatsApp IM. Then you need to justify your idea or request. You need to keep it very brief. It's a short message, right? And it's all about persuading others. So you need to justify why you are requesting it. If you are writing to your boss that you need vacation or something, you need to justify it. If you are writing to your company, to a company from which you bought a product and you are trying to return this product to them, then you need to justify it, why you are returning this product. You need to also deal with obstacles. You need to anticipate. You need to imagine and expect objections and resistance from others. It's only natural that people are going to say no to you. So you need to imagine these different scenarios in your head and try to come up with a potential response to different reasons for why your request would be denied. And then finally, motivate action. So try to appeal to people in order for them to be convinced not only by your message, but to act upon it. If you are requesting a raise from your boss, then try to push them and motivate them to give you that raise, to actually do something, to put in a request for you with human resources, for example. If you are trying to convince your local store to return, to accept the return of a product that you bought from them and give you a refund, then convince them, then try your best to motivate them and push them into doing exactly that by following, by doing something, by having something actionable that you would that would result in what you're trying to achieve. So now, how to start. We mentioned in a previous chapter that we have a direct approach, a direct plan, and also an indirect plan. So a direct plan, a direct introduction, is basically when you present your idea first. You begin with exactly your request exactly. I'm writing because I'm requesting a raise, for example. I'm sending you this message because I want you to accept the return of this product and issue me a refund. So when is it more effective to use a direct plan? When you're writing to your supervisor, you want to present the idea at the very beginning so that they know exactly what this is all about. Supervisors, people with managerial and supervisory positions typically have limited, time to spend on, addressing such requests. So you need to be very brief with them. You need to have a message that that is very short, but at the same time very informative and complete with details and also accurate. It is also a good idea to use a direct plan when your audience is predisposed to listen objectively to your request. What that means is certain people, certain groups of people whom you have addressed before, when you know that, as you know, these types of people, these types of groups, that this department, this store, when you have approached them before, they are leaning more towards, you know, being objective when it comes to evaluating requests, then it would be a good idea to use a direct plan. When you know that this professor, when I tell them exactly what I want from, you know, when I tell them my request exam, that I need you, professor, to, you know, give me a makeup exam or to reconsider my mark in a certain exam. When you know that before, when you approach that professor in a direct way, it worked well, then it could be a good idea to use a direct plan. When the proposal does not require strong persuasion, when you do not need a lot of convincing in order for your proposal, for your suggestion, for your request to be approved. When the proposal is long or complex, when there are, you know, lots of points relevant to your suggestion or your proposal or your request, then you don't want to present all of those points first, otherwise the reader is going to be confused of what exactly is being requested here. So you begin with the request first, and then you present all of those long and complicated points. And finally, when you know that your reader prefers the direct approach, again, how do you know this? From audience analysis. When you know that my supervisor, when you know that that client or that customer is someone who prefers, you know, straightforward messages, then you go with that. You go with the preference of your audience. And when is it a good idea to use the indirect plan? When you are writing to a colleague or to people people who report to you. When you are writing to the people that you supervise. Okay? Why? Because you don't want to sound bossy. You don't want to sound impolite. So you present your audience in this case with why you are writing them this message, and then you present them with the actual request. When you're writing to someone outside the organization, again, sometimes when you are too direct, when you are being very straightforward at the, you know, at the earlier stage of your message, then people are going to maybe, you know, not react positively to it, because you will sound like as if you are giving them an order or a command instead of a request. When strong persuasion is needed. So when you know that, you know, this is a very difficult situation, and it is very likely that people are going to say no to your request, then you begin with, you know, the convincing points first, and then you present your request. And also when the reader is initially resistant to your proposal, when you know that the professor has told us before that there are no makeup exams, that, you know, all marks are final. So when I know that there's a 99% chance that the person I'm writing to is going to say no, and he or she needs a lot of convincing, and they resist, it's very likely that they are going to resist that proposal, then you begin with the convincing points first, and then you present your actual request. And finally, when you know that your reader prefers the indirect approach, again, it's all about audience analysis. And also, you know, we go back to an earlier chapter, like chapter number 1, when we know how culture sometimes plays a role in this. In certain cultures, when we talk about countries, when we talk about organizations, when we talk about people, in certain cultures, people prefer not to be addressed directly. So they prefer to be, you know, convinced first. You want to be indirect with them because this is what they prefer. Otherwise, they are going to interpret your message as, you know, you are giving you as if you are their boss, and you are just basically giving them a strong order that they must adhere to. So when to use a direct plan, when to use an indirect plan. There are a variety of situations you need to make the right decision for your message to achieve its purpose. So here's a nice example of, a direct and an indirect opening. In the direct opening, you are basically at the very beginning, you are just presenting your request or suggestion or proposal. I am writing to request that you replace the shirt I purchased. This is what you want. And then why you are requesting this, what is the reason behind it? Because the color has faded. So you present your request first, and then you present your supporting ideas. In the indirect opening, you present your reasons first. Okay? Why? When is this better used? For the situations that we explained in the previous slide. So I've come to expect premium quality in the products I purchased from your company over the last 10 years. And you can imagine my disappointment when the shirt I purchased recently faded after it was washed the first time. So you are appealing to their emotions, you are appealing to their credibility, whatever it is that you're trying to use in order to convince them of the reasons why your request should be considered. Okay, so you begin with the reasons and the supporting points behind your request, and then you actually present your request. So I would like you to replace my t-shirt, I would like you to issue me a refund, or whatever it is that you are trying to communicate. So we mentioned that you need to justify your proposal, your idea, your request in order for others to be convinced of, granting you that request. So what type of approaches or factors that you can use for justification to support your request, to support your idea? You can use facts and statistics. So you can use objective statements and statistics that can be verified. Okay, so choose a few relevant data points to avoid overwhelming the reader. In this case, you are trying to show them that, you have mentioned, for example, relevant to the previous example, you have mentioned in your advertisement that you offer a 5-year warranty on your products, and after using your product for only 1 month, it has failed to to meet the advertised elements. So in this case, you are using facts, and you could also embed some statistics in your request that the average product should work for about 5,000 hours, and in my case it only worked for 10. So again, it's one way you can use to justify your request. A good rule of thumb, a good guideline is not to use too much of it, otherwise the reader is going to be overwhelmed with a lot of information and data. A second way to justify your request is using expert opinion. So include experts to support your points, particularly if your credibility is in question. So if you are trying to present an idea to your boss, and you could use some opinions from experts in the organization or in the field, that a huge guru in the business is saying that this is a good way to approach this project. So maybe in this case your audience, in this case your boss would be more convinced. And also you could use examples, so using relevant representative cases or incidents to illustrate your points. So basically, when you show them that in a similar company there was a similar situation and they have used something similar to what I'm trying to present you, and it worked well for them. So in this case, you are using an example or an analogy maybe in order to convince your readers of your message. So it's all about supporting your idea. You could support it with facts and statistics. You could support it with expert opinions, or you can support it and back it up with examples. When writing short persuasive messages, you need to deal with obstacles. What we mean by obstacles, basically resistance and objections to your request or proposal. So what do you do here? You anticipate, you expect, you try to guess basically what are, some of the reasons your requests would be denied. So you imagine scenario A, scenario B, and then you try to address these obstacles. You try to address these concerns. So I would say I would, write a message to my boss telling him that I need a raise, I need a salary increment. So I will try to imagine. He would say no because maybe we don't have enough budget. So I will try to, come up with a response to that. I could say that even though that is correct, I know that there are, uh, budget allocations for emergencies, and I know that we don't have to use it this year, so this budget could be reallocated to grant me the raise that I'm requesting, and so on. So you need to address them directly. You cannot just tiptoe around them. You need to address them head on. You need to devote little space to objections. What that means is that you need to not only imagine what could happen, not only expect and anticipate some of the reasons why your proposal would be denied or rejected, you also need to, in your message, you need to have, a certain part where you address this. But it cannot go, you cannot devote a larger space for addressing these objections, otherwise your message is going to have sort of a very negative tone. So you need to uh, consider the option of having, back and forth types of messages. And then finally, incorporate objections into benefits. So how can you, resituate the objection in a way that actually come off as a benefit? So basically what you're trying to do over here is that you're trying to imagine not necessarily imagine, but you're trying to anticipate and expect some of the reasons why your readers would object to your message, to your proposal, to your request, and then you're trying to devote some space in your message to address that concern, and at the same time you are trying to combine it with the benefits. So you are saying that this raise that I'm requesting is going to have its impact on our budget, but this is also going to have a larger impact on my motivation as well as the motivation of the entire team, and therefore we are going to work harder and we are going to generate more profits. So you try to address these obstacles in a very direct manner, otherwise you would be in a situation where you might face rejection. And the last thing you want to do when writing short persuasive messages is that you want to motivate action. What that means is that you need to specify your request at the end of the message. You need to tell your receivers, your readers, what it is that you want them to do. You don't want to just state your reasons. You don't want to just offer supportive points. You want to tell them what it is exactly that you need. So you need to state or restate the specific request later in the message. So for example, I need you to respond by the specified date or whatever. And then you need to make the desired action clear and easy for the reader to take. So not only you need to specify it, but you need to be very clear about what you want them to do. So what that means is that you need complete information. You don't just tell them, I need your response. You need to tell them, I need your response by a specific date and time. You need to tell them that you can be reached, for example, through, the following means, etc. And then you end on a forward-looking note continuing to stress reader benefits. What that means is that you need to be positive, you need to encourage your readers and the receivers of your message to actually be motivated, to actually be pushed into doing what you need them to do. So a forward-looking note, meaning a future perspective. So you can tell them that I'm looking forward to hearing your response soon, or I'm sure that we will have a prospering relationship in the coming few weeks, or something similar to that. And finally, use a polite, sincere tone and include compliments only when they are sincere. So we always say that in written communication. You need to be sincere and you need to be polite, you need to be respectful, you need to be gentle. So you don't tell them, respond or else. You don't tell them, if you do not respond, I will get in trouble. This is not positive. So you need to be positive and you need to be polite and also respectful. So if you look at the example right here, so you don't say I need your recommendation by Friday or I'll miss my deadline. This is not positive. This is not forward looking. This is not polite. So instead of saying it like that, how else could you phrase it? So this is for you to think about. So this is not very positive, this is not very sincere, this is not very polite. So instead of saying, or I'll miss my deadline, you can just simply say, your recommendation received by Friday is going to be highly appreciated. So something a little bit more professional and a bit more polite. And now with the third item on our agenda for this chapter, and that is sales letters. Now, some of you might wonder, I'm an engineering student or I'm a computer science student. Why do I need to learn about sales letters? I'm not going to be a salesman. Well, the techniques that we will introduce are not only applicable for salespeople or for marketing students. You can use those techniques in order to promote any product, service, or any type of thing that you require for your job. It could include things, even if you are an engineer, you could be tasked with, promoting a certain project, promoting a certain project to your bosses or to a potential client. As a computer science student, you will deal with clients and you will want to convince them and persuade them to, hire your company's services, to provide them with software updates, for example, or hardware upgrades. So learning about sales in general is not only for marketing students and for salespeople, it's for everyone, because business nowadays is all about selling. It's all about selling ideas, selling products, selling services, or even selling yourself, promoting your own qualities and skills and unique attributes. So throughout the coming part of the chapter, this is exactly what we will be talking about. So one major technique that you would use and that would be effective in sales letters is finding and selecting a central selling theme. So in here, you want to find one major benefit for the readers and then try to emphasize it throughout the letter. So this is why this is not the first thing you do, because the first thing you do in writing messages like this is audience analysis, right? So after you have studied your audience and after you have analyzed your audience, now you would know, what kind of things do they appreciate, what kind of things they like, what would be, a selling point for them. So now that you know this, you would, try to emphasize it and stress it throughout your letter, throughout your report, throughout your presentation. So every time you introduce a new paragraph or you introduce a new slide, you would still link it to that central idea. so that you keep emphasizing it and you keep making it stronger. So this is one example. If you could pause the video and read it thoroughly, you would see how there's a central idea, and every time the writer introduces a new point, they try to link it to that central idea. So this would be a good example of how you want to emphasize a central idea throughout a writing piece. So openings are always very important, and we have discussed openings a couple of times in previous chapters because, you know, the introduction can determine sometimes, you know, whether or not the reader is going to even continue reading. So this is why at the very beginning, earlier in your presentation or in your letter, you need to have some sort of a attention grabbing opening. Otherwise, it's not going to be very much effective for your readers. So here are some techniques and some ideas that you can use for your openings. One of them is a rhetorical question. So it's not an actual question. I'm hoping now that you have completed English Composition 1 and 2, you understand the concept of a rhetorical question. So you're trying to, you know, it's not a question that needs an answer. This is just you trying to make a point. So in this case, what is the item, what is the product that we're trying to promote or sell? It's a high-priced car, a luxury car. So an example would be, what is the difference between extravagance and luxury? How many times have you seen advertisements that start with a question like that? And then another technique that you could use is, you know, provoking thought, you know, influencing your readers and your audience to think a little about something. So in here, the item that we are trying to sell or promote is an early morning television news program. And an example of how to use, you know, thought-provoking technique in an opening is, most of what we had to say about business this morning was unprinted. So in here, you are trying to push your readers and your audience to think a little. Why was it unprinted? What is the reason behind this? And then you could also use unusual facts, and you could use current events to make things, you know, more relevant to your audience. You could use an anecdote. You can use it. An anecdote is basically a story. And then you can also use direct challenge. So you could challenge your audience, challenge your customers, your clients to do something, and this is how you try to make your point and how you would, you know, show them some of the features of your product, some of the features of this ballpoint pen, for example. So earlier on in your message, whether that message is a presentation or a letter or something else, or maybe it could be a tweet, so you could use some of those techniques in order to grab the attention of your audience. Now, relevant to that same topic, now we have talked a little about the introduction or the opening of your message. Now let's talk a little about the rest of the message and how we can create interest and build desire. So how can we make our readers and our audience, our clients, our customers even more interested? How can we make them interested in what we are trying to sell them? Again, if you are an engineer, this could be a certain project, this could be a certain new invention that you are trying to, you know, showcase to your customers, to your bosses, to a new client, to a government agency. If you're a computer science student, this could be a new software or something. And of course, if you are a business student, then this is going to be part of your job as a marketeer or as a human resources professional. You want to promote, you know, even a new procedure, for example, a new way of doing things in the organization. So you want to, you know, get people to buy into what you're trying to sell them. So one of the things that you can do to do just that is you can interpret the features. So devote several paragraphs to interpreting the product's features. So explain to your audience, to your readers, to your customers, some of the major features of this item. Okay, how can this system help them? How can this product help them make their lives easier? You can also use vivid language. What that means is that you're trying to make them attentive. You're trying to make your readers attentive to what you're trying to explain to them. So vivid, using a vivid language, like trying to use real, make them basically live the situation. Imagine that if you are targeting, for example, homemakers. So explain some of the, or like explain some of how these features are going to help them raise their kids, and how they're going to help them go through their day and be more relaxed, for example. Use objective and ethical language. So we have emphasized ethics and objectivity throughout our course. Whenever you are communicating, you need to be honest, you need to be sincere, and you need to be definitely ethical. You always want to be truthful. So maintain credibility by providing specific facts and figures. Do not oversell it. Do not blow some of the facts out of proportion. Do not, show and tell your readers something that doesn't really exist in your product or service. Then you also have to mention the price. So subordinate or downplay price in your message. What that means is that, of course, everything costs money. And if you feel that the price of your product or service could be a little higher than what your customers are used to, then you want to emphasize the features, you want to emphasize the benefits before you mention the price. Otherwise, your audience, your customers are going to be a little put off. And then refer to enclosures. So refer to enclosures at the end of the letter, meaning, so how exactly can, like, how do you end your message? So, and how can you, how can this product or service help your customers, and how would it basically make everything come together in a sort of a one selling theme. So throughout your message, whether it's a presentation or a message or a tweet or a letter, you need to create interest and build desire. How can you make your audience, your clients, more interested, and how can you make them how can you make them motivated enough to actually make a decision to hire your services or buy your product? Another selling technique is that you would be better off emphasizing and stressing what your product is rather than what it's not. So instead of saying things like, our car is not one of those cars that break down all the time, it's actually a very durable and reliable car. You don't say that. You don't want to, your audience and your customers to make a connection between a negative, aspect and your product, even though you are saying that it is not. But subconsciously, sometimes, readers and customers would automatically make that connection and assumption. So what you want to do is that you want to emphasize the features. You want to emphasize what your product can offer your audience. So our car is a durable car, is a reliable car, blah, blah, blah. Instead of saying it is not something that breaks down all the time, it is not a highly priced item. So here are also a few examples. If you want, you can pause the video and go through them. But the main and major point here is that you want to emphasize what it is, what it can offer them, instead of what it cannot offer them or what it is not. So instead of saying it's not a product that breaks down all the time, it's not something that has high calories, so you can just simply state the facts. A good way of also, making a sale, a good way to, convince and persuade your readers, your audience, to buy your product or service is that you can change the features to benefits. So one of the features of your product, for example, of your laptop battery, is that it lasts, for 6 to 8 hours. Instead of saying, a bland fact like that, you can rephrase it in a way that offers a benefit to your audience. So you can tell them that the life of the battery allows you to chat with your friends and family for 6 to 8 hours. So instead of just simply stating facts and information like that, you can change the feature into a benefit. And instead of saying things like the apartment includes utilities, so the price of the rent is inclusive of utilities, this is a fact, this is a feature of your real estate. Instead of saying it like that, you can change it into a benefit by saying you will be saving a lot of money every month because our apartment includes utilities. So try to think of more creative ways of how your product or service can influence their lives, your customers' lives. And this also applies to you as a person. How can you benefit an organization that you are trying to join as a co-op student or as an employee? You don't tell them, I have a degree in business, I have a degree in mechanical engineering. Well, we have hundreds of thousands like you. So you want to change that feature into a benefit. So due to my good knowledge of mechanical engineering degree, because I acquired from Jubail University College, I am able to help you do 1, 2, 3, 4. I have good skills in project management. I have good skills when it comes to designing projects and designing products for our customers and so on. So change bland features into benefits. And now with the uncomfortable part, talking about money and mentioning the price in your message or in your presentation, in your sales letter, basically. So this is a major selling point for customers. So even though your product or service can be absolutely great, sometimes it's just the customers work on a budget, so you cannot basically convince them to buy any of the things that you're trying to sell them simply because the price is just not right for them. So of course you need to pay a lot of attention to how you mention price. First of all, sometimes price is your competitive advantage. Price sometimes is your selling theme, your central selling theme. Maybe you are offering prices that are way below average. So in that case, you need to emphasize it earlier on in the message. If not, if price is not actually your central selling theme, then you need to mention it later. And then you need to link it to the benefit. So instead of just, again, simply mentioning bland facts like that, or the price of our car is 50,000 riyals, you need to emphasize and mention the benefits. For that 50,000 riyals that the customer is going to pay, what are they going to get? How is paying that going to actually be of benefit to them? And then you need to mention and present the price in small units, and also compare it to familiar objects that may soften the expenses. What that means is that you need to show how your price is actually not very high if you compare it to other daily expenses, for example. So one of the examples that we have here is that instead of mentioning 50, $12,000 or riyals per year, you can say it's less than $1 per day. So when you mention it in small units like this, it basically softens the blow. So people are going to be a little more comfortable hearing $1 or 1 riyal instead of hearing 50,000. So you try to mention it in small in small units like that. And also you can say, one of the examples that we have over here also says, yet surprisingly, these benefits are all yours to enjoy for the modest fee of just $35 a year. So after you have mentioned all of the benefits and introduced some of the major features, you can now mention the price. Again, try to mention it in small units and emphasize the benefits. And then, as we mentioned before, one of the last things that you want to do in your persuasive message is motivating action. So how do you motivate action? You need to specify exactly what is required. So how can you convince them to do something? What is the decision that you want them to make, and how soon? So you need to make the action clear and easy to take. So you need to specify exactly what needs to be done by them, and you need to clarify the timeline. So you need a response, for example, by the end of the coming week, by a specific date and time. You need their response in writing, maybe. You need, is it an email? Is it a written report or something? So you need to be very clear about what is needed. And then you need to ask confidently. As we mentioned before, you always need to keep a confident tone. You don't want to seem hesitant. You don't want to seem shaky. You don't want to seem as someone who is unsure of what they're asking. So always be confident. You need to be firm, but at the same time, you need to be polite and respectful. You also need to encourage prompt action. So when we say prompt, we mean, quick, swift, and immediate. So try your best to motivate your audience, your decision makers, to take action as soon as possible. And finally, end your letter with a reminder of a reader benefit. So it's all about selling an idea or selling a product or motivating, persuading your audience, your clients to do something for you. So in order to constantly keep that in their minds, always keep coming back to mentioning the benefit. So when they take that decision, what exactly are they going to get? So we need a response by next week so that we can proceed with our procedures, so that you can enjoy the benefits of our product or service, and so on. And here are some examples of what we mean by using a positive tone when you are addressing a group of people that you want them to be convinced of an idea of yours. We mentioned that yes, you need to be confident, but you also need to be polite and respectful. So instead of saying do this right now, you need to deliver this message in a more sincere way. So instead of saying hurry, 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 do the action right now, you can say call before September 30 to take advantage of our lowest price of the year. So you are encouraging them to take action, to call you. That's the action that you want them to make. And also when? Before September 30. And then you are reminding them of the benefit to take advantage of the lowest prices. So try, always to keep those factors in mind. You need to be positive, you need to be confident, you need to be clear, and you also need to keep reminding your readers of the benefits that they will receive by taking that action. And now with the last and final part of our chapter, and that is responding to feedback. We have addressed and we have seen in previous chapters a couple of parts about how to respond to feedback, especially when it comes to contents of social media. So we will retouch on this particular issue to see how can we address feedback and comments in a more effective way. So when it comes to social media responses, we have seen this flow chart before in a previous chapter. So first of all, you need to make a decision. Do you have to respond or not? You don't necessarily have to respond to each and every comment and post on social media. So this process flow chart would help you make a decision. So first of all, you need to evaluate, is this post positive or negative? If it is positive, is it a happy one? Then if it is not positive, so what kind of negative response is it? Is it degrading? Is it misguided? Is it unhappy? And then for each and every situation, there's a recommended action. Sometimes you only need to monitor. You don't need to actually respond. You just need to, keep monitoring the activity. And sometimes you need to respond, but in which way? In the case of misguided facts, for example, you need to fix the facts. And in case of unhappy responses, you need to restore the relationship by offering maybe your clients some discounts, some benefits, so that they can, trust you again. So revisit this flow chart and go through it in a more thorough way to understand how or which responses are appropriate for which situations. And now when it comes to writing complaint letters and negative online reviews. So if you want to make a negative comment, you as a customer, you as a beneficiary of a product or a service that is offered to you by another company, how can you tell them that something is wrong with their product or service? So it's always better to use an indirect style. Why? So that you can, you show them exactly that you are not being biased, that you are being reasonable, and you are listing or mentioning the, exact reasons why you have a negative opinion or a negative review about their product or service. So always consider an indirect style. What's an indirect style? This is when you mention the supporting points first, and then you mention your request. So your request could be issuing you a refund. Your request could be to exchange the product, to return the product and give you something else in return. So an indirect style, meaning you have to mention your reasons first. Another thing you can do is give specific evidence about what went wrong. So you need to be explicit about what is wrong with the product or the service. Why are you asking them to give you your money back? Or why are you telling them that I will no longer be a customer of yours? You need to give specific evidence. So you can show them pictures, screenshots, for example. You can, mention the details and list the, the events of a particular action that happened. And then you maintain a calm, objective tone. What that means is that when you get too emotional, I mean, we mentioned before that you could use, one of the modes of persuasion is using emotions. That is correct. But when you become too emotional, you lose your credibility. So you need to keep calm and always remain objective, so that you don't seem like you are biased or that you have something personal against them. And finally, close with a confident and respectful tone. Even though you are upset with them, even though you have a negative opinion about what they offered you, you still need to be respectful. You still need to keep a respectful and polite tone, but at the same time, you need to be confident and firm. So instead of saying things like made my date sick and waste of time and money, how is that helpful to them? I mean, if they want to use your comment to improve their services, this is not really helpful. So this is a waste of time and money. Okay, I understand that you are upset, but why? Just giving me bland comments like this one, it doesn't really help me. So if you really want to make a difference, if you really want them to improve, then tell them what went wrong and how can they fix it. So now, how can you respond to negative online feedback? So in case now you are the producer or the provider of a product or a service, and some customer or client mentioned a negative comment, so what do? and that comment is negative. So one of the things you could start with is show appreciation, first of all, for the feedback. You can thank them for the review. Even negative comments would give you the opportunity to respond and restore your company's reputation. In business and in marketing, they always say that actually one of the experts in marketing and in advertisement in general, he said that I'm not really scared of the customers that speak out their mind. I'm not unhappy with the customers that say that something is wrong with my service or my product. I'm actually more scared of those who keep silent. So when someone comes forward, even with negative comments, this gives you the opportunity to understand what is wrong with your product or service and come up with a plan to fix it. One of the things you can do in your response to negative feedback as well is reinforce positive aspect of the review. So some reviews and some comments, some posts would mention something good about your product, but then would mention also something negative. So you would face comments like this: even though the car is very reliable and it doesn't break down, but the price was very, very high. So what do you do in your response is that you can emphasize, how durable and how reliable the car is, and then you can, address the price aspect next. And then you can address negative aspects directly. So instead of tiptoeing around it, instead of trying to avoid commenting on that negative review, you need to explain the situation and what will you do to correct it, and then follow through to use negative feedback to improve operations or service. So it is really a good source. You need to keep an open mind about negative comments. You treat them positively. Treat them as an opportunity to know what is happening with your products and services and how can you fix them. How can you come up with a plan to talk to the people in the plant to improve the quality and to ensure that everything comes out as planned and as intended. So just address the negative aspects head on. And finally, invite the customer back. So you need sometimes to motivate them to motivate them to keep being your client or your customer, or if they said that I will never come back to the store again, so you need to restore the relationship with them. So you need to offer them something to help them, to convince them and persuade them of either keeping the relationship or restoring it. So what you can do is that you can promise them a better experience, and you can offer them something motivating. Offer them a discount, offer them a gift, offer them something that would help them change their mind. So the last thing that we will do today is I want you to look at this review. So this is a comment made by a customer on TripAdvisor. You can read it, pause the video if you need, and see how negative the response is. And in case you were the hotel manager, what would you do? How would you respond to such feedback? Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you on the next chapter.